Yeah, hello and welcome everybody to our first episode of the Dish podcast. That's our name. And this is a test episode, so you guys are guinea pigs for us. We will talk today about Goumi berries. And I had no idea what Goumi berries are before I talked to Penny, who's here on the podcast. Anyways, we have very exciting guests. My name is Mark. I'm the host of the podcast, and Alexa is our co-host. Alexa, hi.
Hi, everyone. Super excited to be here with you today. My name is Alexa. I've been at the Berry Lab working in communications for just about a year now, and I'm really excited to do this podcast.
Yeah. So, Alexa, did you know anything about Goumi berries before we had this idea?
So my first experience with Gumi berries was at a lab social at Kyle's house, and Kyle is also here on our podcast with us. And yeah, I just remember trying like one or two, and I was really taken off guard by how they tasted because they I think they look really pretty, kind of like cherries almost, and they tasted nothing like what I expected. So, yeah.
Yeah. What I like about you is that you're always so nice about things, 'Cause so that was my first time I tasted Goumi berries too, actually, at the same event.
Oh, I didn't know
And
that.
yeah, no, I had no idea what Goumi berries were before I met Kyle and Penny. So
If
yeah,
you want people to not come back to your house, then I guess you serve them Goumi berries, and they don't come back to eat anything there.
yeah. So we're trying to shed some positive light on Goumi berries today. So that's our plan. So I want to introduce some of our guests, and John Dole is our guest today. And John, you are a rock star, basically, in our department at least. So that's pretty cool. And you see rock stars' phones; they're never they're never quiet. So so John is a professor in horticulture in our department. He works mostly with ornamental plants on flower physiology. He was also associate dean for graduate studies in the college and also interim dean of the entire college for a while. That must have been a pretty stressful job. So John, just a little bit about you. How did you end up? And give us a little bit insight of how did you end up in horticulture? What drove you to horticulture?
What drove me? Well, I grew up in horticulture. I grew up in West Michigan, and I grew up next to a farm market stand. Mr. Bucher, he grew gladiolas, bedding plants, and fruits and vegetables. So I, in particular, helped with the gladiolas. I would plant the corms and help him pick the flowers. And this started when I was just a little kid, about 8 years old, according to my parents. Then I moved on to picking fruit. We would start with strawberries and then raspberries and finish with apples. That's how I earned money as a kid. And then in high school, I discovered the joy of plant seed catalogs. My parents had to rein me in, of course, because I loved everything. I wanted to order everything. But for some reason, I was very much taken with dried flowers, straw flowers and various things like that. So I ordered a bunch of those, started growing them, and I sold them to local florists. So that got me started on the ornamental side of things as well.
And that was as kid already? You started that as kid?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
that sounds like a pretty nerdy kid.
I was nerdy before nerdy was cool. I'm not sure if nerdy is cool yet, but I'm going to go with nerdy being cool somewhere. But yeah, I was a hardcore plant nerd. I started seedlings in the basement under fluorescent lights, had Phalaenopsis orchids and all kinds of houseplants in the basement under fluorescent lights. So yes, I put the nerd in plant nerd.
Wow. That is impressive. So you really followed your passion through, was there a time in your life where you didn't want to become a horticulturist?
Actually, when I went off to school, I toyed with being a wildlife biologist because I very much like being outdoors. I like wildlife. I'm a bird watcher, butterfly watcher, all that stuff. Um, so I went down that path for a while, but there were no jobs at the time in wildlife biology because I wanted to be a park ranger. So switched over to horticulture and never looked back.
Wow, that's cool. That's very cool. Yeah, I wanted to be. I had like this time where I wanted to be a wildlife photographer.
Oh,
You know,
wow.
yeah, because I was in birding too for a while, and but it was pretty hard to do that and earn money at the same time.
Those little details kind of get in the way sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. Well, we are very happy to that you are in the cast, and we also learned that you are basically the driving force behind the new Goumi Berry grassroots movement that we are talking about today. So, how did
Great.
you get into Goumi berries?
Pardon?
How did you get into Goumi berries?
Well, well, plant catalogs, what can you say? Of course, now they're all online. Um, just scouring, we were looking for unusual fruits. And then we were up at Edible Landscaping and the company up in Virginia. And we had noticed them before, and we went ahead and got some plants um, and planted them. And boy, they took off. They've done very well. We've since done a little bit of propagation and put a few more in. So yeah, we like them. I'm hearing the undertone earlier that some folks may not like them very much, but um, you got to harvest them really ripe. And we've never done the baseball bat trick, although with as many as we've had, I think I might have to try that. Um, so if you pick them really, really ripe, then they're very sweet. They're called Goumi cherry, and the cherries a little more, yeah, they just have a fruity flavor.
Yeah.
And if you don't pick them completely ripe, they have astringency,
Yeah.
which is what people tend to react to. And I'm very sensitive to that. So I don't like to eat them until I know they're completely ripe.
Yeah, well, there's some tart cherries though, so
Yeah,
it's probably where the cherry is coming from.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
yeah. And some people are just taken off guard. Other people are more vocal about that they don't like the Goumi berries that much. So, yeah, cool. So I'm very excited that you're on the cast. Another person on the cast is Penny Perkins-Veazie. Is that how you say it? Can you say this for me?
Yeah, it's far too hard. It's Veazie, rhymes with easy.
Oh, Veazie. Oh,
Yeah.
there you go.
And
Yeah.
if it helps any, it's a town in Maine. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you become a horticulturist?
Oh, it's kind of funny. I think it was the same way as John. I kind of followed my passion. I grew up in a rural area of Maine, and we basically raised our own fruits and vegetables, well, mostly vegetables to get through the winter. So, from an early age, I was out there with a hoe and picking beans, which I will never grow again. Um, and for me, it was always much more fun to do the floriculture side of it. Whatever. My grandfather was big in raising ornamental type plants as a hobby, and so that was what I was really focused on. And I wanted to go into plants science at the University of Maine, but it turned out they had more soil science courses than plant science courses. So I ended up doing a lot of soils work, which I had no passion for at all. And then went to Florida because there were no jobs in Maine in horticulture. Went down there and it was like the light bulb went on because it's all about specialty crops in Florida.
Mm.
And then went on to I did production work and then went into post harvest and ended up oddly full circle. Mark, you may not know this, but I knew John in Oklahoma. So
Oh.
I was at the USDA location in southern Oklahoma, and John was with Oklahoma State for a short period of time. So that's how we originally met. So full circle, and we ended up. One of the things with post harvest, I work a lot on antioxidants, and an autumn olive, which is a cousin of Goumi, is very high in phenolic compounds, especially tannins, as well as lycopene, which is a carotenoid, very good for antioxidant properties. It has 10 times more lycopene than watermelon or tomato. So, but autumn olive, there was a project going on with USDA at the time, and autumn olive was basically ripped out because it's too invasive. And then, so when John mentioned Goumi, we started checking into it, and it does indeed tend to be non-invasive. We actually checked that in our plantings, and also the fruit are much bigger. Birds love them, of course, and we also found the same antioxidant properties.
Yeah. So by invasive and non-invasive, what exactly do you mean? Is it like does it not populate like open spaces as much as the other species, or
Yeah. So, and you know, my mom made the mistake of planting somewhere in a yard of autumn olive, and so I saw firsthand what happens after 10 years of autumn olive. But the problem with well, the good and the bad news about Elaeagnus, at least these two, is that two species is that they make their own nitrogen and they're drought resistant.
Mhm.
And the problem with autumn olive, both of them, the birds carry the seeds around, and autumn olive easily will also send down. Autumn olive will send underground laterals pop up everywhere, plus the seeds quickly will propagate
Mhm.
in other areas. And they were used for the coal mines to repopulate the strips after the coal was removed from the mines. They were used to cover the coal mines. And I had inquiries from people in West Virginia about what to do with autumn olive out there. And they were actually sending crews out there to harvest the autumn olive by hand. In comparison, Goumi is like 3 times bigger.
Right.
So, it's an interesting crop. The other thing about Goumi, I started looking around, and it turns out there's a huge project going on in Poland, of all places. They've done a lot of cultivar evaluation. They've even selected their own cultivar there, and they really like it. It's very adaptable. Originally it came from Central Asia, so it really likes cooler weather, but it does fine here in North Carolina,
Mhm.
which is
Mhm.
a little surprising.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. We'll talk a lot about this later. Maybe we can start a little bit of what it actually is and where it's from. It's from Southeast East Asia, and as far as I know, at least. And we also don't know exactly how many cultivars do well in North Carolina or not. So I don't know how many cultivars you're growing in your plots right now, or John, how many different varieties do you grow in your garden of Goumi Berry?
We have two formally, and then there's a third one
Mhm.
we got at Edible Landscaping, but it wasn't what it was labeled. We've got a small berry, a big berry, and then an intermediate berry.
Mhm.
So sweet scarlet and red gem, we know for sure. We're not sure what the third one is.
Okay.
So red
Okay.
gem is the small fruited one, prolific to the point of obnoxious in terms of how many fruit it produces. And then sweet scarlet is a bigger fruit, but fewer of them, much easier to pick.
Right. So do you have like do you see any differences between those cultivars, or are they all performing the same way?
They love North Carolina. They're doing very well. I can address the invasiveness. Yeah, that whole genus has really got a lot of problematic plants. We've had our plants in the ground for over 10 years. 2 years ago, we got our first seedling.
Mm-hmm.
We were waiting for it to flower and bloom because there's other Elaeagnus species in the wild around our place. So we're not sure it's Gumi. It could be one of the others because there's about 4 other species around. And then last year saw another one. So 2 plants in about 10 years. Um, the part of the issue, it actually is hard to propagate. We've not been able to get the seeds to germinate, and we're having a hard time with the cuttings.
Mm-hmm.
So that was part of the project, was to figure out how to propagate.
Which then makes it non-invasive because yeah, if it would be an invasive species, needs to be easy to propagate or easy to spread somehow, So yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, okay. Kyle, you are a fresh Goumi Berry grower. Your garden slowly evolves into a John Dole garden. If you do this for 20 more years, you're going to be there. So, Kyle, how did you end up in horticulture?
Yeah, I have a very different story. So I did not grow up in horticulture, was not interested in plants, did not have parents or family that was really into gardening. So for me, it was kind of just not even on my radar until I started doing some project management work for USAID in developing countries like East Africa and Asia. And I've always been a foodie. I love cooking, and so that's always been, central to the things I enjoy doing. And so then traveling to those countries, you see how much agriculture and horticulture specifically, and just food production in general, is central to those countries, those cultures. And so starting from the food perspective, and then trying to, figure out where some of these fruits and vegetables and plants come from, and going to farms and traveling around there is what really kind of hooked me. So kind of making that connection from what are the foods I like to what do they actually look like as, plants in the wild or within cultivation. And so, a lot of people say you can't change as you get older, but I completely, changed my perspective on plants and my enjoyment from them, and then was hooked ever since, and kind of changed careers and focus. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into horticulture.
Yeah. So there are two different life paths here. It's very interesting. So there's like the people who grew up with it, with a farm, and then basically followed their passion because they loved what they're doing. And then we have a converted horticulturist here. Yeah.
It's easy.
In fact, we have two, because I'm also converted horticulturist. Yeah. Yeah. Because I did not grow up on a farm. Yeah. Very cool. That's a good mix. So Kyle, let's start a little bit talking about Goumi berries. And I think the one thing that I'm really interested in before we talk about growing and how good it works in North Carolina, what are the things that people have to think about is like, what are you doing with Goumi berries? So what can you do? So first of all, Penny, it sounds to me, at least what you described, that a Goumi berries could be a very healthy food. So is there like any evidence for that, or do you see anything that would like point into a direction like high antioxidants or anything like that?
Yeah, everything that we've done, and also in autumn olive, indicates that they have a lot of unique properties. The problem is trying to figure out the next steps. It's relatively easy to gather and process them. The question is how to make a new product that takes advantage of all of this.
Mhm.
And for us down here at Plants for Human Health, it might be more about trying to figure out how to spray dry and sell a powder, for instance. But for right now, we're still like in the baby stages.
So you're looking more into like nutraceutical realm rather than food products.
There's a lot of interest in using, lycopene both as an antioxidant as a colorant. The big problem is, my first thought was that the high phenolic content of the Gummies would help protect the lycopene from turning brown, but that's not the case. So back to square one on that. But the other interest, the other thing that we haven't looked at on Goumi, which is very unusual, Goumi has a big pit in it, which has its own interesting properties as well. A very high.
I noticed the pit when I ate them.
Yeah, that's where the cherry thing came from, I think. But yeah, they have. I mean, you kind of can crunch them up. Our simple assays for total phenolics indicate they're extremely rich in phenolics, but we haven't looked at them in detail to see if they might have something unique. But the other thing is they have a very waxy peel, and that cuticular wax could also have some health properties in itself.
Oh, so that's interesting. So is there let's dive a little bit into this. So is there interest from industry, nutraceutical industry, in using Goumi berries at some point, or is this just like a research experiment at this point of time?
It's a research experiment because to get the industry interested, you have to have enough acreage. So you have the chicken and egg situation here, and then there's a number of issues that have to be overcome, which I'm sure we'll go into, like harvesting, in order to get there. So for us, it's strictly laboratory level right now to figure out, okay, can we figure out exactly what's in there? And like I said, there's some good papers that came out of Poland that did a lot of characterization of the components of Goumi berry, which were helpful.
So is there like, you might not know this, but maybe John knows this, or Kyle, is there like a Goumi berry nutraceutical industry like in another part of the world, like let's say in Poland or in Southeast Asia or something? Is that happening?
Not that I'm aware of, but I can't say that I've looked.
Yeah, right. I haven't heard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Poland's exploring it, but they haven't. They're at this kind of the same place. They're ahead of us because they at least know how to start doing an orchard.
Oh,
And
so that's okay. So that is that's new to me. That's
yeah, they
so that
also.
would
Yeah, the more important part to me is they're looking into how to machine harvest.
Mm.
yeah, not with the bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's interesting. Well, Kyle, do you want to talk a little bit more about like the food products that you can make out of like Gumi for like people who want to grow this in a home garden situation? Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's still a lot to explore with how to use it. I mean, and John might be able to speak a little bit more about jam and jelly use, but I think it's has a good purpose for that. I've, you know, John got a lot of us into it, and he certainly got me into it because I've always my search and passion is trying to find edible plants and mostly fruits that do well in North Carolina, which is hard to find.
John is the root cause.
John is the root
It's
cause. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I like the fruit. I think getting it to maturity and ripening it so that it's sweet versus astringent is a challenge. We can talk more about that. But I mostly, purchased it and planted it for fresh, fresh picking and eating it the way it is. But, you know, timing and trying to figure out when to do
Mhm.
that is hard. I have not processed it. And there's not a lot of flesh or juice. So, they do produce a lot of fruit per plant, but I think you would need
Right.
quite a bit in order to get what you need to do some other product with it.
Right. Yeah. Do you have like a can you so I mean I tasted those fresh, and so how would you describe the taste to like anyone who has not tasted a Goumi Berry now? Because I think I'm very biased here. So let me ask you and John how you would describe the taste.
Yeah, I mean, I'm unique in the sense that I like really sort of polar flavor profile. So I like very tart and sour fruits, and so I would say they can be pretty tart and sour, and then you get the astringency, which I don't like. If it didn't have the astringency and it was just sour, I would probably still enjoy it. But most people, as soon as they bite into it, just get that mixture and don't like it. I don't know that it has a lot of flavor other than just kind of some sort of fruity profile, but I do like that it's tart. While other people like Alexa, when she tried them, was not a fan. So
Yeah. So do you do anything with it, like cooking or pastries or cocktails? Did you ever try anything to do with Goumi berries other than just eating them fresh? John,
yeah, that's a John question.
that's a John question.
Yeah, we use them a lot for jam and jelly. We'll pick them and then put them through a food mill where we strain out the seeds and the skins. That takes care of all the astringency.
Oh,
Um, so, actually we cook them first and then process them and then collect the juice. We make jam with it directly. It has a little hint of a cherry flavor. I think the cherry gumi comes more from the size and the color than the flavor. But I find that it mixes pretty well with other fruit. Like Kyle said, it does not have a strong flavor of its own. It has a fruity, tart flavor.
yeah.
And it blends very well with other fruits. For example, raspberries, just really picks up the flavor of the raspberries. It picks up the flavor of strawberries, and so it blends very nicely with other fruits. So
Yeah.
we do make some jam with just the gummies, but then more often we blend it, and then the color is nice to some of the other fruit blend with some of the other fruits. It's great for smoothies. The funky thing about it is when you cook it, process it, and then you get a whole jar of juice, it separates out. And so the solids will fall to the bottom, and the solids have all the color. and then at the top will be a clear, very tart liquid. So if you let it sit in the refrigerator, it'll sort out into various layers, which is kind of funny.
Yeah. So when I tasted it first, the first thing that came to my mind was actually a cocktail. So since we're so healthy, I want to go into that direction. So I thought they might go well with rum and some coconut, maybe a little bit sugar, and then Goumi Berry. I can see that because of the tartness, and the stringency. So that was like when I tasted it at Kyle's, and I don't know if they were ripe or not, but when I tasted it at Kyle's, it was like the first thing. I wanted to get drunk, basically. That's I thought they might go very well with it.
Well,
So-
we can get you some berries next year, and you can try various cocktails.
Yeah. I think they would be a good
There is
cocktail
recipe.
berry.
Yeah, there is a recipe out there for vodka martinis using Goumi.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah, I can see that actually. Yeah.
I wonder maybe Kyle if could they make an ingredient in one of your wine blends? Do you think it would be a good addition?
It's true. Maybe next year we do strawberry muscadine and Gumi wine and see how that turns out. But yeah, I mean, certainly if it's providing good color, then that can definitely be applicable in other fruit wines that might not have as much color. So that's an interesting idea.
Yeah. All right, cool. So let's jump a little bit into growing. And the first thing I think everybody wants to know is what's the size of a Goumi berry? So we talked a little bit cherry size. That's probably one cultivar. The one cultivar that I know is smaller than like a typical cherry would be, So that's kind of like what I know. So John, can you talk a little bit about what typical size is for like a Goumi berry?
Of the three sizes we have, the biggest is the size of a little bigger than a nickel, maybe.
Oh, that's big.
And then the smallest, golly, maybe half the size of a dime, but just prolific. I mean, the plants are just covered with them. We like the bigger one for obvious reasons. The other I will mention also in terms of the size, we've had all three, and so it's hard to tell what any one of them would do alone. But it does appear that having more than one type does promote berry set. A little bit online says it can be self-fertile, but it does better. And so that does appear to be true. The other very practical thing we have noticed is that by having the small one, the birds gravitate to the small one. And so they will focus on eating that one and generally leave the bigger one alone for me to get to it.
So it's your burner Goumi, basically.
Yes. Yes. I will add also, we have a mockingbird for many years that nested in the Goumis.
Huh.
And it was sort of the mafia sort of thing. The mockingbird would get paid off in berries, but drive all the other birds away. This past year, the mockingbird did not nest in the Goumis, and so every bird, it seemed like, was in those trees or those shrubs. Just we had more bird problems this year than any other year, and it's because the mockingbird did not nest in the shrubs.
Yeah, you need to get the mockingbird back, basically.
That's right.
Maybe another gang moved in or whatever. You never know.
Well, there was no gang, so everybody moved in.
Yeah. Maybe your gardener just reside two different gangs and they just fight about the Goumi berries, and the mockingbird was just, your mobster boss who basically, left at some point or.
That's right. They opened up the territory. Yeah, we had cedar waxwings, summer tanagers, brown thrashers, robins were all in there at various times, where before it was just the mockingbird.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, not a very commercially practical solution, I might add.
Yeah. You see, like a little bit organized crime. Yeah.
We actually put nets, the planting we put out at Piedmont, we put bird nets over it to see if that would help.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yes.
a little.
Yeah, that's the one thing I heard from everyone who I know has Goumi berries, which is also everyone on the podcast, by the way. So, that birds really like Goumi berries a lot. So
They do.
yeah. So for anyone who wants to grow them outside, like nets, did they help?
They seem to help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So either you get like a mafia bird and have a burner gumi like John does, or you have bird nets. Yeah. Yeah. Kyle, how about you? Do you have like a bird mafia?
I have a lot of robins, and they ravage both of all of my plants pretty quickly. Which I'm like John. I can't figure out if I really want the fruit or I like seeing the birds, and maybe I'm somewhere in the middle because I want the fruit, and then it attracts the birds, and then it's kind of interesting to watch them swoop in and take them. But I think if you want to get those berries to maturity and get as much harvest as you can, I really think you'd have to have netting because it seems like all kinds of birds like the berries.
Yeah. Did like the mockingbird ever like come to your door, ring the bell, and just came with an Italian accent or something and just ask for more berries? You're gonna have to pay my share.
I have the robin mafia in my yard, so it seems like there's a lot of turf wars over Goumi berries.
Yeah, that's interesting. All right, so Goumi berry is like a tree, and or is it a shrub? It's more like a shrub or more like a tree?
A big shrub.
It's a big
Yeah,
shrub.
I'd say a large
Tree at one
shrub.
point, but I shouldn't. It's a big shrub.
Yeah.
I was really hoping, I was hoping this would be like a single stem with branches coming off of it.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's not what it turned out to be.
So like with like all perennials, so now we're talking a little bit more my like realm of like, what I kind of know. So with all perennials, usually you have to prune. So do you guys prune your Goumi berries or just let them like go and you don't prune at all?
I prune mine partially because if you're familiar with Elaeagnus as a genus, they really throw out these like long whip shoots.
Mm-hmm.
They can get really, really long in the season of new growth. And I think, one, it throws off the form of how the shrubs look. But two, I think it would make it just harder to manage if you didn't prune. So, mine are probably 3-4 years old, and I've pruned them every season really since they were young because they put on a lot of growth.
Yeah. John, how about you guys?
About every 2 years, take a chainsaw to the middle of them and get the big stems out.
That's probably why the mockingbird left, actually.
Could be.
I would too if a chainsaw came through my house.
All that construction noise. But yeah, the stems in the middle get really big, and taking those big stems out kind of shortens them as well, because they're next to our blueberries and they've started to shade our blueberries. So partly we're trying to reduce the height, and partly just trying to thin the shrubs out. So cutting out the big, older stems every couple of years is what we do.
So you practically have like at any given point, usually just like 2 or 1 year old wood, and then everything which is older you would basically cut out on a frequent basis.
There's some stems that are older than that, but yeah, that's the basic idea. The oldest stems we cut out every couple of years.
Yeah. Penny, how about you? You are a new Goumi grower.
Yeah, new Goumi grower. Yeah. So for us, I was playing with this. What's the easiest way to harvest these things? And my original thought was a hedge. And after last year, I decided that wasn't a good idea. And originally we were pruning at 6 feet, thinking, well, we can't reach up that high. We wouldn't want to go beyond that. But last year's experience was I kind of prefer the whippy growth because I can bend that stem down and hand pick it much more easily into a container than trying to reach up and pick off the stem and avoid the thorns along the way. So now I'm not sure quite what to do on this one as far as pruning goes.
Chainsaw.
I may come to that.
I will say too, I feel like if, mine are probably 3-4 years old, maybe like 8 feet right now, and I've pruned them a couple times, but I had them on irrigation pretty consistently when they were young to establish, and that was pushing a lot of growth very quickly, and since then have cut that often. I feel like the growth has not been as rapid. I mean, they still grow pretty quickly, but I think you could find some strategies to manage some of that growth so that you can keep whatever form you want a little bit more
So
manageable.
they're like, if they're mature, they're like 8 foot high. So like 7 to 8 foot. That's typically how high they are.
I don't know how big yours are, John. I mean, mine are younger. They're mature-ish, but they're probably about that size with the longest either shoots or central kind of stem that goes up.
Yeah, are probably about anywhere from 8 to 10. We do not irrigate them at all.
Mhm.
Yeah, we got other things that need it much more.
Yeah. Even when they were young, like in the first year, you didn't irrigate, you just put them to the ground.
No, we watered them in for the first
Right.
year to get them established.
So when do you expect like your first set of fruit? Is like after 2 years already, or when did you guys harvest your first set of fruit on those?
Our plants were 2 years old when we got them and planted them, so we were
Okay.
harvesting next year. But it took about 2 years to really get a full crop. And we talk about mislabeling. So I supposedly have sweet scarlet, red gem, and a newer one called Carmen. And the sweet scarlet was setting fruit about 2 weeks before the others. So I'm not, and it wasn't nearly as big as I remember the ones I got from John. So, I got them all from the same nursery, and I think maybe they're all mislabeled.
Seems to be a theme there for that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I know exactly what we have.
Yeah. Kyle, do you know what you have?
I have sweet scarlet. I purchased them from Edible Landscaping in Virginia, so hopefully they're accurate. But yeah, I guess it's a question of, how they were propagated, if cross-pollination has a impact,
Right.
and, where some of those original plants came from. So just given the market's not very established with it, it's possible we all have who knows what, but they were labeled sweet scarlet. So
All right. Yeah. So 2 years until you get your first like crop, and then maybe 3 until you get like a full crop potentially, and 8 to 10 foot, John. They're like 10, like high, potentially chainsaw pruning and bird mafia.
Yeah.
And yeah, like, but they seem to grow pretty easily in North Carolina. Do you guys do a lot of pest management, or do you have to like nurture them a lot, or they seem to be pretty adapted to the climate here?
The only thing I noticed was needing some water during establishment.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We've seen no pests other than the birds.
Wow.
Yeah, I've never seen pests, never seen any signs of disease or anything.
That's pretty uncommon for our climate. That's very uncommon. Yeah. So other than that, so let's talk about harvesting a little bit, and yeah, like yield potential. If you guys even know that, but Penny, did you guys take some data on that? Or
Yeah, we did. We did take some data. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about it?
Sure. Yeah, so I think the first year we got, I think, about 5 pounds per fruit, and then last year we were up to 15 to 20 pounds per plant. I mean, not per fruit. Of the more prolific, Carmen seemed to be the one that was most prolific for us of the 3 so-called varieties. And I have to say, though, by the time we did our second red gem plant, we decided that was enough harvest forever on that one to get complete yields, even with a wiffle bat. But yeah, the different.
Are you whacking your trees?
Whacking, yeah, we were whacking. We tried hand picking. It took us 3 of us an hour and a half to pick one plant.
Yeah, maybe the bird mafia is not messing with you.
Yeah, and I do know there's a grower up in the western part of the state that is organic and evidently does his by hand. And I was sort of like, is that a punishment if you screw up somewhere, right? You have to go pick Goumi Berry. But yeah, the yields were actually pretty much on target with the few reports I'd seen out there for it. So they are very prolific.
That is an impressive yield, though. Like,
Yeah.
what did 10 to 15 pounds per plant? That's
Right.
quite a lot. Is that what you guys see? Like, Kyle and John, is that what you see too, more or less?
I've never measured it just because
Yeah.
mine are still younger and the birds take them so soon. But if I had netting, I feel like I would have a better chance.
Is that what you measure minus the mafia like portion that you have to give up?
I measure in the palm of my hand how much I got that season.
I'm afraid I've never measured. I want to try. I think next year I'll try the tarp and the shaking the branches.
Yeah.
I may bypass the bat, but I may just shake them. But I think that would be. Yeah, I want to try that.
Yeah, I really think for harvesting a modified blueberry harvester might work.
Might work. Yeah, like on commercial scale. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing we're really interested in, didn't get to on this grant, was possibly ethylene. We're trying to figure out ways to apply it, and maybe a rootstock or something if it's economical. But we didn't quite get to that point to see. And then unfortunately, that's not labeled for organic growers. So that's the other downside for ethylene.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about yield and how to pick. I would say most people in the home garden they pick by hand, So I don't think they're going to go out and whack the tree and something. So is that how you guys do this usually, John? Like you go and pick by hand?
Yep.
And that typically takes like a day and you're done.
Well, the go for just the ripest fruits. So the fruit ripen over a couple of weeks, probably, between the three different berry sizes cultivars.
Right. And how did you identify like a ripe fruit? Do you taste it, or you see it like on the color, or is it just experience?
The ones with the smallest fruit, which could be red gem, they turn very, very dark red. And the largest one, whether that's scarlet or not, has a little more orangey cast to it. So that one doesn't get as dark a red. But yeah, usually I just go out and start sampling a few, and then when the number that I've sampled is mostly no astringency, then start to pick.
All right, cool. We only have 5 minutes left, which I just realized. So, I wanted to ask you guys if you have like anything people need to know about Goumi berries, and I'm gonna start with Kyle, and I'm just gonna go around everyone, just like in 1 or 2 sentences. What do people need to know about Goumi berries?
Yeah, I'll share 2 things. So I think one, whether it's grown on a commercial scale or a home garden, the fact that it does fix its own nitrogen, which Penny mentioned, is really nice because you don't have to have fertilizer input. And then I grow it, within other fruits on our property, which do require a lot of nitrogen. And so it's a nice companion plant. And then I will say about propagation, I've been actually really successful propagating through hardwood cuttings in the winter, dipping in IBA and NNA for rooting, and then keeping them under mist for probably takes like 2-3 months to root. But I think I probably had like 75% rooting percentage from hardwood. So, there's ways to propagate it that could be helpful.
In grapes, it makes a big difference when you take those hardwood cuttings. If it's like at the beginning, like how they're acclimated, how much they're acclimated to the field. So that when do you usually take it, like at the beginning, like October, November, December-ish, or when do you take usually your hardwood cuttings?
No, I probably took mine, I want to say like January, so late winter, and then rooted them, and they were probably, rooted in March. So I think they're just a little slow to root, but keeping them under mist and using some rooting hormone seemed to help.
All right, cool. Yeah. That's good information. John, 1 or 2 sentences.
That's great to hear. We tried cuttings in the summer and had a pretty low success rate. So it's good to hear. We've also had pretty good success with air layering.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to try the winter cuttings since we're coming up on January. They're a big shrub. You got to have room for them. A small urban backyard, it's going to be too much for. You'd want to do something like a blueberry or something like that in that sort of an area. Easy care.
Okay, cool. And Penny?
Yeah, I definitely would say they like full sun. Definitely, you have to have a big place for them and be prepared. They could be like a good guard plant because those thorns or whatever you want to call those appendages can be useful for keeping out intruders. But other than that, they're really good. Also, I think their wildlife value might be extremely important for some homeowners.
Yep.
They have it, by the way, their flowers are very fragrant.
Yeah.
So that's another attraction.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. You also can let out your aggressions once a year when you just like
Chainsaw, yeah, whipple bat.
yeah. So they're pretty early. They're coming on like what in like over strawberry season usually, like April, May, or when do you usually come on?
Yeah, this year they were ripening for us. They were ripening between right the 1st of May to the end of May. So
Yeah, so during May.
this one is getting hot.
Yeah, yep, that's quite early. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate all your time. We're a little bit over the time that we planned, so we're gonna distribute your information with the podcast. And thanks for your time. And I'm gonna stop the recording now.